If you were not looking closely at Harrison's hands during that final, deeply uncomfortable scene in the mansion living room, you completely missed the real story. While the camera focused on the tears welling up in Brooklyn's eyes and the smug, subtle smirk playing on Willow's lips, the true narrative was hidden in the rigid, white-knuckled grip Harrison maintained on his police badge. Everyone is so focused on the screaming matches and the apparent destruction of a marriage that they are entirely ignoring the micro-expressions of a seasoned detective who is actively working a case. If you ask me, that subtle tightening of his jaw and the deliberate way he avoided making direct eye contact with his own wife was not the guilt of a cheating husband or a manipulated fool. It was the intense, calculated restraint of a man who's holding all the cards and waiting for the exact right millisecond to play them. Right now, we are looking at what can only be described as a dangerous, dead-end stalemate for everyone involved. On the surface, the board is set in a way that makes Harrison look like the ultimate villain in his own marriage, completely blinded by a scheming woman. Brooklyn is isolated, furious, and desperately trying to expose a rival, while Willow sits comfortably on her high horse, believing she has successfully wrapped a righteous police officer around her little finger. But if you take a step back and analyze this from a purely logical standpoint, this entire setup reeks of a massive, meticulously designed trap. The current dynamic is a psychological powder keg, and the writers are pushing us to believe that a highly decorated, fiercely loyal detective has suddenly lost all his investigative instincts just because a woman batted her eyelashes at him. I simply do not buy it, and neither should you. To truly understand where this is heading, we have to examine the psychological motive behind Harrison's recent baffling behavior. For weeks, we have watched him seemingly abandon all logic, defending Willow against every accusation and alienating his own family in the process. But what if this is not blind devotion? What if this is the most brilliant undercover operation of his entire career? I firmly believe that Harrison noticed the glaring anomalies surrounding Willow a long time ago. As a trained investigator, he would have picked up on her inconsistencies, her sudden shifts in demeanor, and the dark secrets she has been so desperately trying to keep buried. However, he also knows that confronting a master manipulator directly is a losing game. Therefore, his sudden shift in loyalty is nothing more than a calculated move to disarm her completely. By choosing to stay dangerously close to Willow, Harrison has actively chosen the most perilous path available to an officer of the law. He is playing a high-stakes game of psychological warfare. If you ask me, he realized that the only way to catch Willow slipping up was to become her ultimate shield, her most trusted confidant, and her fiercest defender. By doing so, he feeds her ego and lulls her into a false sense of absolute security. When a criminal believes that the police are firmly on their side, they stop covering their tracks as carefully. This implies that every single time Harrison defended Willow to his family, he was secretly cataloging her reactions, noting her alibis, and silently building an airtight case against her from the inside out. Of course, maintaining this elaborate facade requires a devastating sacrifice, and that brings us to the shattered trust between Harrison and Brooklyn. To make his undercover operation believable to a highly paranoid target like Willow, the marital strife had to look, sound, and feel completely authentic. Harrison could not afford to let Brooklyn in on the secret. If she knew he was just playing a role, her relief would have been visible, and Willow would have instantly sensed the deception. Therefore, Harrison had to let his wife believe the absolute worst about him. He had to stand by and watch her heart break, allowing their escalating arguments to serve as the perfect, impenetrable cover for his hidden agenda. This brings us to the recent explosion regarding the hit-and-run accident that left Jordan hospitalized. We all know that Brooklyn orchestrated a plot to frame Willow for the crime, altering GPS data and planting evidence. On the surface, this looks like a desperate wife taking extreme measures to take down her rival. But consider the unforeseen fallout of this framing plot. Brooklyn's actions, while legally questionable and emotionally driven, have actually handed Harrison the perfect catalyst to execute the final phase of his master plan. When Brooklyn publicly hurled those severe accusations at Willow, she unknowingly set the stage for Harrison's ultimate performance. Instead of immediately launching a formal investigation into Willow, as everyone expected, Harrison is likely going to use this moment to execute a shocking, ulterior motive. Imagine the scene where he decides to temporarily place his own wife, Brooklyn, under arrest right in front of Willow, citing a lack of concrete evidence against the accused, and citing harassment. This would be a breathtakingly cruel but necessary tactic. By slapping cuffs on the woman he loves and marching her out of the room, Harrison would cement his loyalty to Willow in stone. In Willow's mind, a man who would arrest his own wife to protect her is a man who is entirely irreversibly under her control. This temporary arrest of Brooke Lynn would be the ultimate catalyst for Willow's downfall. If you ask me, watching her nemesis get hauled away by the very man she believes she has conquered will send Willow's ego into the stratosphere. She will feel completely invincible, untouchable, and supremely arrogant. And that is exactly when criminals make their most fatal errors. Believing that the chief investigator is her personal bodyguard, Willow will inevitably lower her guard, perhaps moving to destroy hidden evidence, contacting shady associates, or slipping up in her carefully constructed lies. She will have no idea that every move she makes in the dark is being recorded, analyzed, and added to a massive, undeniable dossier by the very man she thinks she owns. While Willow is busy gloating and enjoying her perceived victory, Harrison will be working tirelessly in the shadows. He will be quietly gathering the real, unadulterated GPS data, cross-referencing testimonies from people like Joe and Justine, and securing the undeniable proof of Willow's actual crimes, including her obstruction of justice and evidence tampering. He is not just building a case for a simple hit and run. He is building a comprehensive indictment that will tear down Willow's entire pristine facade. The sheer brilliance of this strategy is that Harrison is using Willow's own manipulative nature as the very weapon that will destroy her. Now, as we look toward the inevitable climax of this storyline, we have to consider how the writers will choose to execute the final reveal. The tension is building to a breaking point, and the unmasking of Harrison's true intentions will undoubtedly shake the entire canvas. This leads us to two very distinct, highly dramatic possibilities for how this trap will finally snap shut. Scenario A suggests that we are heading for a massive, highly public takedown that will leave the entire town reeling. It looks like Harrison might wait for the most opportune, crowded moment to drop the hammer. Imagine a grand gathering at the mansion, perhaps a family dinner or a formal event where Michael, Tracy, and a recently released Brooke Lynn are all present. Willow would be holding court, playing the victim, and looking to Harrison for his usual unwavering support. But instead of offering a comforting hand, Harrison steps forward, his demeanor entirely changed. The warmth in his eyes vanishes, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a seasoned detective. In front of everyone, he pulls out a massive file of undeniable evidence and begins reading Willow her rights. The sheer shock of a public arrest, detailing her hit-and-run involvement, her evidence tampering, and her endless web of lies, would be a masterclass in soap opera drama. In this scenario, the public humiliation is just as important as the legal consequences, completely destroying Willow's reputation in front of the people she tried so hard to fool. On the other hand, Scenario B points toward a much more intimate, psychologically devastating betrayal. Could it be that Harrison prefers to corner his prey when she is completely isolated? In this scenario, Harrison would wait until he and Willow are entirely alone, perhaps in her home or in a secluded office. Willow, feeling triumphant and safe, might even attempt to thank him for his loyalty, leaning in for a moment of shared victory. But the atmosphere would instantly freeze. Harrison would slowly step back, dropping the manipulated fool persona entirely. With chilling calmness, he would lay out exactly how he played her from the very beginning. He would detail every lie he caught, every piece of evidence he secretly collected, and every moment he pretended to care just to get closer to the truth. The psychological horror of realizing that her ultimate protector was actually her executioner all along would absolutely shatter Willow's mind before the handcuffs even click into place. Regardless of whether we get the explosive public spectacle of Scenario A or the chilling private destruction of Scenario B, the aftermath of this revelation will be monumental, especially for the marriage that served as collateral damage. When Brooke Lynn finally realizes that her husband never actually betrayed her, the emotional whiplash will be staggering. She will have to process the fact that the man she thought was abandoning her was actually sacrificing his own reputation and their immediate happiness to bring a dangerous criminal to justice. While the relief of knowing his heart always belonged to her will be profound, the trauma of the deception will not vanish overnight. Harrison will have proven that he is a brilliant cop who is willing to put the law above all else, but he will also have proven that he is capable of lying flawlessly to the woman he loves. If you ask me, this entire speculative narrative elevates Harrison from a passive, easily manipulated character into a top-tier, strategic mastermind. It respects his history in law enforcement and provides a deeply satisfying payoff for weeks of frustrating television. However, knowing how these writers operate, I highly doubt they will let things resolve without leaving some lingering damage. Even if Harrison successfully puts Willow behind bars and proves his loyalty to the badge, the scars left on his marriage will take a very long time to heal. Will Brooke Lynn be able to look at him the same way? knowing how easily he played the villain. Will Willow find a way to slither out of the charges at the 11th hour, turning Harrison's brilliant trap into a legal nightmare? We are standing on the edge of a massive narrative cliff, and while the fall promises to be spectacular, I am deeply skeptical that anyone will walk away from this wreckage completely unscathed.